Good morning, everybody. I think it's time for us to start this webinar. First of all, I want to remind you that we are recording this webinar, so it will be possible to watch it afterwards. This webinar is about one of the hottest issues within the international mobility community, Mobility as a Service, or MaaS. My name is Martin Tollén, and I'm chair of the working group for transport and mobility at AER, Europe's largest independent network for regions. I'm also a politician responsible for region development and public transportation at region Östergötland, Sweden. MaaS is an enabler for the transformation to more sustainable transportation in urban areas and to meet the demand for mobility in more rural areas where traditional public transportation is not the smartest solutions. And I've come to understand over the last years that regions and cities are important actors, maybe the most important. But we as decision makers, we have a very low knowledge about MaaS, and a lot of us doesn't even know about the word MaaS. And those of us who do know, we don't really know what change we need to achieve or what decisions we have to make. And therefore, we have gathered this Euro 2021 All-Star team of the brightest European minds within these fields. And as a coach for the team, I have asked Edwin Mermans to moderate. Edwin, you're from the region Noord-Brabant in the Netherlands, and you're one of the most important actors within the European MaaS ecosystem. If you Google new mobility services, I'm sure that you will reach Edwin that way. So I was a bit starstruck when you accepted to moderate, and I know by my own experience that when you are the moderator, it will be a very good day. So I hand over the screen to you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can't see I'm blushing, but I'm honored to moderate the event, and I'm looking forward to it. Also with an excellent lineup of speakers today and a lot of participants. So first, also some housekeeping rules. If you don't speak, to keep your microphone off. And of course, I was speaking about participants, so I would really be happy if you, during this 90-minute session, also would participate actively. And that can be done also through the chat. So you will find the chat function under your screen, and then please don't hesitate to ask questions and interact with us. Before we go to the six speakers talking about the experience of MaaS in their region, first I will tell something about myself because you might not know who I am. I am International Affairs Officer at the Province of Noord-Brabant in the Netherlands, working at the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, mainly focusing on sustainable and smart mobility, not only, also TEN-T and some cross-border collaboration. In Europe, I'm active in several networks, but what Martin was referring to is also the so-called New Mobility Services Initiative. I'm coordinating that together with one of my colleagues. And the purpose of New Mobility Service Initiative is really large-scale deployment of new mobility services in an urban context, something which is easier said than done, and in which learning by doing is really key, and in which all stakeholders need to be involved. I'm not going into detail about that, but what I saw about what all the speakers are going to talk about, that is exactly also what we are working on. I'm also happy that one of the speakers is from my own region, so I will stop talking now about my region and myself, and give the word to Ebba Bjerkander, who is going to teach us about the European transport policy in transition, and give you also some interesting opportunities that arise from the new strategies of this European period. So the floor is yours, Ebba. Are you ready?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Edwin. I'm just going to share my screen. Here we go. We're going to start with the first slide, maybe, and not the last one. Here we go. Thank you. Yes. Thank you for inviting me to the seminar. Very, very interesting. I'm going to talk more about, well, the big picture, the European transport policy right now, where we are. And then also, then you'll make the connections to, you'll see how mobility as a service fits into this. And I work for Central Sweden European Office, which is the EU representation office of 3 Swedish regions, Dalarna, Gävleborg, and Örebro County. And Gävleborg and Örebro County are both members of IR. So, well, if we're going to talk European transport policy, we have to start at the beginning, and then we have to, well, the beginning. Well, we have to start with the first priority, which is climate. And then, of course, the European Green Deal, which and the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, presented in December 2019. And this is, I mean, it's the new growth strategy. And this is maybe one of the biggest steps the European Union ever has taken, because in 30 years, we're going to be climate neutral. Well, we want to be climate neutral. I mean, European Union started as a coal and steel union, and now we want to be climate neutral. So this is huge, actually. So this is the first priority, and then, of course, the transport policy will follow. And the EU transport policy is built up on 3 different parts. We have the objective, which is, well, I will present the strategy next slide, but it's the sustainable and smart mobility strategy. Second part is the implementation, the TNT, the maps, actually, of the most important transport parts in Europe, road, rail, and so on. And then the funding, the Connecting Europe facility. So, I mean, the strategy is new. It has less than a year. It's less than a year. We have an upcoming TNT regulation, so we will be new. And we have a new program period, which meaning a new funding instrument. That's why it's a 2. So Connecting Europe facility was already in the period 2014 to 2020. So now to 2021 to 2027, new program period, but the same name for the funding instrument, so CEF2. So the sustainable and smart mobility strategy, it's a part of the Green Deal. The Green Deal is the objective of climate neutrality to 2050, and then they have different parts of this, different sectors with different strategies. So we have one for transport, this sustainable smart mobility strategy, but there's also for buildings, for agriculture, for hydrogen. I can go on. So the overall objective for this strategy is the green transition of the transport sector. And the objective is that by 2050, the emissions from the European transport sector should be reduced with 90%. And then how we will do this. So we have different goals to different years, and in 9 years or 8.5, we want a lot more zero emission cars, meaning zero emissions. So it's from the tailpipe they measure. So hydrogen electric cars mostly. And there's also this initiative for cities to pledge to be climate neutral. And they want at least 100 cities. I think this is most probably connected to the Convent of Mayors, if you know this. Then the strategy also wants to increase the high-speed rail traffic. And also that all public transport under 500 kilometers should be carbon neutral. And I think this is very interesting for the MaaS. It also wants to push automated mobility, and also when it comes to marine transport, they want to have more zero emissions. So this is in 8.5 years. Then by 2035, they're looking also on air traffic. And then by 2050, all vehicles should be zero emission. And much more freight traffic on rail. And then we have the TNT that should be fully operational. So there's a lot to do in the years to come. So that's the basis. And then the second part, the TNT. This is the map of the current TNT. And the Trans-European Transport Network has 2 layers, you could say. One is the comprehensive network, and that's should be completed to 2050. And then the most important parts of the comprehensive network is the core network, and that should be completed until 2030. And then there's of course more conditions when it comes to road. It should be motorways. I'm simplifying, but more or less. When it comes to rail, there should be a certain capacity, a certain, how do you say, when it comes to longer trains and so on. And then we have, so it's railways, there's roads, there's waterways, there's port, airports, terminals, everything connecting to both passenger and freight transport. So, and this now is being revised, these maps. So that's the regulation. So the current regulation, the objective is to close gaps, to bring the better cohesion into the European Union, and remove bottlenecks and technical barriers, and then, well, to actually, I mean, it's the transport networks has to work if we want a functional internal market. So this is also about trade, of course, or economic growth. So it's all connected together. And what we'll see then, I'll take to the next slide actually. So this current TNT regulation is based on the previous strategy, which was called the roadmap to the single European transport area, also known as the white paper from 2011. And this now is replaced with the new sustainable and smart mobility strategy. So this will mean that the Commission will is doing a revision of the TNT regulation right now, and it's 3 dimensions that will be strongly reinforced. And first, it's climate, which is then based on the sustainable smart transport strategy. And then there's the digitalization, which is, I mean, it's part of the green and digital transition that we're working on right now. So it's connected to the Digital Europe agenda as well. But also, I mean, the TNT was written, the current TNT regulation was written in 2013, meaning digitalization has taken a huge leap since then. So this needs also to be updated. And then the third part that should be reinforced is the resilience part. How do we have a European transport network that is also resilient when it comes to crisis, not only a global pandemic that we have seen right now, but also when it comes to climate change and climate adaptation, and also quality of infrastructure. So these three parts, well, the three dimensions, I would say, were definitely stronger in the new proposal, which is planned for November this year. And that's the Commission's proposal. Then, so the Commission will propose a new TNT regulation in November, and then, well, the member states has to decide what they believe and think in the Council, and then the European Parliament, of course, you know, the European decision process. So it's going to be a year or two, maybe, before we have a new regulation in place, or a decision at least. And then the third part. So you remember the maps of the TNT network with the comprehensive, and the most important part was the core network. And then the most important parts of the core network in turn is the core network corridors. So there's actually 3 layers of these maps, only that the third layer, the most highest priority parts, are defined in the Connecting Europe facility, in the funding instrument, not in the TNT. So most of the funding is earmarked for the core network corridors. And as you see, they're going to be prolonged in certain places. That's the dotted lines. So a large part of Sweden and Finland was not part of the core network corridors before in the current in the earlier program period. So, but we don't have a decision yet, final decision on this FT. F2, that's they're still dotted. We're waiting for their formal adoption of the Parliament, which will happen this summer. So there's 3 parts of the CEF2, as it was in the previous one. So we have one envelope for transport, we have one for energy, and one for the digital part. And transport is then mostly for the core network corridors, but not only. There's also budget for alternative fuels and other things, and then in the core and comprehensive network. You can only get funding from the CEF if you're part of the TNT, and if you're also prioritized by your national government, because it's the member state that actually do the application. So that's transport. The budget is more or less the same from the previous program period, and there's extra. Well, there's a part of the budget that only cohesion countries can apply for, and cohesion countries are those countries with less than an average income, you could say, less than 75% of the average income in the European Union. Then there's part for energy, that's more the energy infrastructure, so gas networks, cables, you know, and really large projects. Cross-border projects, which I actually forgot to say that big thing about the TNT and all this is, of course, the trans-border part. So funding for projects that, because it's easier, but it's a hard thing for national member states to finance sometimes, is the cross-border projects. This is one of the biggest reasons we have le raison d'être for the TNT and the CEF, is to bring along those projects with a high European added value, which often is cross-border. Yeah, sorry, a bit of a, and then the digital part, which is then 5G mostly. So there we go, the 3 parts. So 3 new parts, almost new. So we have, in the coming month, we'll then have the CEF2, which will be adopted probably by the European Parliament in July. And after that, we'll have the new core network corridors formally adopted as well. And then the first calls will probably happen in the CEF2, will happen in late summer, early autumn. And then we have the proposal on the revised TNT in November. And then lastly, I want to say a couple of words on the Fit for 55 package that will be presented in July by the Commission. And that's the revision of the most, well, almost all the energy and climate related legislation that we have in place right now. And there's 2 directives I think is really important for the MaaS part. And that's the directive on the deployment of alternative fuels infrastructure. And that's the directive on the promotion of the use of energy from renewable sources. And that's, as it's the 3rd version of this directive, it's called RED 3. The current directive is called RED 2, so you get the logic of this. And this directive also contains criteria for what's a sustainable biofuel. So this is 2 directives. I think it's going to be really interesting to follow. So yeah, the Commission will propose new versions of these in July, and then the whole process starts again. So it's an interesting package. Yeah.
I have to ask you to finish your presentation.
It's done.
It's done. It's great. I'm looking at the chat, what questions we have to you. And while doing so, I have one question to you already. From AR is a network of regions. Do the regions have influence on this TEN-T revision?
Very good question. It's the national. I'd say it's as in a lot of legislation. We have to talk to our national governments, and we have to talk to the Committee of the Regions, of course, and then the Commission. But there's no formal way, except, I mean, the open consultations, of course. But there's no part of the regulation that says that the regions has to have a say. But it doesn't mean that we don't have one. We just have to use our networks like this to make our voices heard.
To lobby your own national ministry.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. No, I learned a lot. It's an interesting presentation. Of course, we could continue for this for half a day, no doubt. I would encourage participants to still put questions for Ebba in the chat, and then you, Ebba, can perhaps answer them later. And,
I will.
It's a pity that we can't spend more time on this now, but we have 6 more presentations also. We want to give them time. So I'm going to shut up again and give the floor to my colleague, Kuijs, who is project leader in public transport innovation, and also he's going to tell how MaaS is used in the province of Noord-Brabant. John, are you ready?
I'm completely ready, Edwin. Thank you.
Mute myself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kuijs. I'm a strategic advisor in the province of Noord-Brabant, and I'm going to share my screen with you now. Let's see. Shared mobility in the province of Noord-Brabant. We have a few different approaches to mobility as a service. We have a more technology-driven approach that's with our colleagues from Smartways, but we also have an approach through the public transport angle, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. And shared mobility and mobility as a service in its core is a method to hook up supply to demand. That's what we are basically trying to do here. And the linking pin in those situations is mobility as a service, MaaS, but also in the real world, we have mobility hubs that link supply and demand. And traditionally, as a public transport authority, we have a very supply-driven approach. We make a map, we put in the lines of the buses, and we roll them out, and that's basically it. That's what we did until about 3 years ago. In Northern Brabant, we have 3 regional areas for different contracts. And we said, well, we should look into a more demand-driven approach. And we shouldn't do that alone. So what we did is we made a project, a program, if you will, in which we, as the PTA, together with all the cities and regional organizations, look at the world of transportation and say, can we make something that's better and that encapsulates basically everything? And let's put the customer in the middle of that. Let him, her, them decide what they want. So that that means that we have to have a lot more mobility options than we used to have. Because usually, traditionally, we have bus services, and there is some shared mobility already. I'm going to dive into that a little bit more. What are the different mobility options? First, we have the bus services. We've got the rapid buses, we've got the regular buses, but we also got a phenomenon called buurtbussen. And I really tried to find a good translation for that in English, but there just isn't. Basically, it means we've got smaller buses that are driven by people and volunteers from out of the community. And we have a lot of them. We have about 162 lines daily. And that's very, very nice to have. They're also professionally supported by the transporters. So that's basically what's happening there. This is what our responsibility is now, the bus services. In addition to that, we're going to add an on-demand service with from every bus stop to a mobility hub, and from every bus stop to every bus stop, transportation opportunities. So as a customer, you can choose which option you want to have. You want to go to a bus stop and have a regular bus, or you want to have a more taxi approach and get a little better along the way. And there is a real opportunity here to combine it with the special transport services for which the cities are responsible. So this is where the goal is. It's a completely new approach for us. And in addition to that, we've got samen. It basically translates as together, but that doesn't do it justice. It's something we do together. These are all the volunteer-driven community initiatives, but also the market, transport, shared mobility services. And all these 3 combined is what we're trying to achieve in Northern Brabant, working together as one inclusive mobility system. Well, this is a screenshot of something that isn't reality yet, but hopefully it will be in the near future. And it's a screenshot to make you show how MaaS could work in the near future. I've just added a few personal preferences to the left side, but it's arbitrary. It could be a lot more, it could be a lot less. But by definition, every shared service is better for, is the more sensible approach, because you're not in a vehicle by yourself, you're with other people, and therefore you lower your carbon footprint. You get better health, everything. But that's our approach in a nutshell. And then came Corona. And that has a huge impact on how we are working with this together. Because we are using the heartbeat, if you will, of the current contracts for public transport. And they have to shift in a time because there is no healthy market at the moment. So transport operators are not taking in new contracts. But that also means there's a lot of opportunity there. A lot of opportunity for on-demand services, shared mobility services. So the takeaway here is never waste a good crisis. And we have to capitalize on the positive aspects of the behavioral shift and try to incorporate them in our approach. So in all of this, I'm going to go back a few slides now. In all of this, the linking pins are key, because all these different mobility solutions have to be presented to the customer in a single and an easy to understand way. And when I heard Ebba talk about resilience a few minutes ago, I was thinking, yeah, but the digital resilience, that's key for the coming years, I think, because that's what makes everything tick in this. So that was sweet and short, Edwin. What I have to say. Do you have any questions for me?
I have a lot, but that's not so relevant. I'm looking in the chat. If you have any questions to you, not yet. And since you have to leave now and will not be in the panel, so I have to represent you in the panel.
You're more than capable.
I would encourage people now to ask something to John if you want to ask something.
No, the takeaways for this, I think, are you have to do this together, not as a single silo approach from your own responsibilities. You don't have to share responsibilities, because you can use all your own different approaches and make a better common goal. That's what we're trying to do here, and try to experiment. It's okay to fail once in a time.
I have two questions to you. Can you say something more about the digital resilience? What does it look like?
Well, mobility as a service, on the customer side, it's an app, and that's brilliant. But under the hood, there's a whole world of strings of mobility connections that have to be looked after. So what we're trying to do is we're not in the market of launching a MaaS app ourselves as a government. We're looking to the market to provide that themselves. But what we are trying to do is do in everything every demand solution that we initiate has to be mobility as a service ready. And we're trying to achieve that by having common digital links, so that everybody has the same standards and we can easily link into that. But when I was thinking about digital resilience, I was mainly thinking about how is it hack proof?
Yes.
Because in a world where we are almost all dependent on apps and stuff, you really need to look into that.
Yes. But since we used all 10 minutes you had, I'm going to the next speaker, and I want to thank you a lot, John.
Okay.
If people want to contact you, they can do that directly or through me. And then thanks a lot. And
okay.
You know,
have a great day, everybody. It's good to see you all.
Thank you. And then
bye.
Bye. We'll go to the next speaker from Norway, Nordland. Siri Vasshaug. Pronunciation of Norwegian is really bad. Siri Vasshaug, project manager. Can you please pronounce your own name better than I do, Siri?
Yes, my name is Siri Vasshaug, and thank you. I'm from the northern part of Norway, in a region called Nordland. And as you can see on this map, we're pretty far up north, and we're on the thinnest part of Norway. I'm a project manager for a project called Smart Transport Bodø. Bodø is the regional capital of Nordland, and we've been diving into the issue of MaaS as well. And in a context of smaller cities on a European scale. For Nordland, Bodø is the largest city, but with 50,000 inhabitants, it's quite small compared to other regions and other cities. It's also a very small, large city when it comes to the surrounding, because it's far from the next large city. And you can also see from the map here that it's a long and narrow region, which means that we are dependent on transport. And to achieve our goal of having a sustainable community and a region, we cannot simply say do not travel when it's 3-hour drive to the hospital or a 1-hour drive to the school. So what we've tried to figure out is how we can make public transport more flexible and more attractive to people, so that they choose differently than they do today. Our goal is, of course, to reduce both the usage, but also the ownership of private cars, to reduce the effect it has on the roads and how it affects also production emissions. So MaaS has the potential to reduce ownership. It also has a potential to supply communities with seamless mobility services. It will, of course, have some challenges, especially in rural areas, which I will address a little bit later, because it does demand a high level of resources, and it needs to have a certain number of users to be beneficial for all users. And we are, of course, also, and I think we've heard that in the previous presentation, that there's lots going on different other developments in sustainable development, whether it's the electrification of cars and buses and ferries and speedboats that we also do have, that might change the need for MaaS in the sense that we see it today. So the potential is great, but there might be disruptive developments that can sort of change the need. In Nordland, we have tested out several different types of MaaS, and we're trying to work agile, which is common in like software development, but maybe not in a regional authority in Norway. But we're trying to test out and pilot different types of services before we roll them out full scale. So last summer, for us, there's quite a bit difference between summer and winter season when it comes to mobility. So last summer, we piloted a semi-MaaS solution where we had e-scooters, cargo bikes, electrical city bikes, and electrical cars available in one platform for the users. And we learned a lot from offering these services, and we see that combining them together, making it easier to administrate your own profile and your own account benefits. What we didn't manage to do last year was connected with the public service and the public transport services. And that we think is necessary to give a full extent of what we can achieve. So what we've sort of concluded after our first pilot is that the region as a PTA will facilitate MaaS, but we will not operate MaaS. And I think this corresponds very well with what Jan just said, how the PTAs will act towards what we will supply and how we will sort of, what will be our framework for working with MaaS. I think for us it will be financing the startup and the necessary development and integration, and maybe find some rules and a platform to share the data. Just like Jan mentioned, finding the standards, whether it is NetX or something else, saying this is the way you need to operate in our area if you will get a contract with us, whether it's on buses or boats. And then, of course, doing the coordination and the communications with potential actors, setting up a network and a formal partnership between the different actors that will supply services into the MaaS, and also set up some rules for how this will work. And I think this point is one of the hardest points, finding the correct business model. And I yet to see someone really sort of coming up with that, whoa, this is how we do it. And I'm interested to seeing what we will learn today, because that business model aspect of it is hard, especially finding it to be easy and flexible and not demanding a great deal of resources to administrate, especially when you come to areas like ours, which is fairly sparsely populated, and that also has something to do with our finances. And then I think working with property development, looking into how we can utilize larger housing areas, maybe sort of having a trade-off and say you will be granted less parking space in exchange for partnering up with us in the MaaS solution. In rural areas, we do see some challenges. I believe that a MaaS solution as of right now is crucial to have an element of micromobility and shared vehicles, cars in it. Because there are instances where you don't want to travel with others, whether it's when you're going to shop for a new bed or something like that, you need to go from exactly A to B. And these shared vehicles or micromobility is harder when people live further away. It doesn't help if I park my e-scooter in my driveway when it's 2 kilometers to my neighbors. No one else will pick it up. So that's one element of that we need to figure out. How can we do the redistribution of the vehicles to make it flexible enough for everyone? And I think one of the things that Jan also addressed is this need for a transport hub. Maybe we need to look more into smaller transport hubs that will be sort of like the traditional bus stop. You get to the bus stop and then you can access different types of transport. But that will set up a need for infrastructure and areas and maintenance, which also is resource driven, of course. And as the end of my presentation, I'd like to sort of address one of the issues that we've looked into. MaaS has this way of saying transport is a service, and for the user, you will just say, I need to go from A to B, and then someone else will fix it. And we've started looking into what we call combined mobility, which isn't the same as MaaS, but maybe for the user, it looks like the same. It does not have a subscription. It does not have necessarily a discount, but it sets up all the travel modes. And this is not new. This is what we do in route planning today. And this is all the route planning apps that you can look at when you go to a new city. So it's just setting up combining the different operators that we already have, and then setting up a price. And the price is combining all the different single-use prices. Which will be less of a business model work, but of course might give a quite high price to the end users. But this is maybe where we're trying to look at it now, where it might not be what we envision in a MaaS context, but it's a combined mobility where we try and give as much information about prices, transport modes, and time to make sure that the end users actually have options in choosing the package, but might alleviate the need for a complex structure behind the screens. So I'd like to sort of challenge the group of people listening to us if they have any thoughts and ideas as to MaaS and combined mobility, and where the public actors, the PTAs, what roles we should take in facilitating this. And that was all.
Thank you. Well in time, in 9 minutes. And we saved the questions to the chat so we can include it in the panel later. So thank you very much, Siri, and see you in the panel. Then we're going to France. Jean-Pascal Klipfel, I'm not sure if I pronounced that well, project manager from Grand Est. The question is, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Good morning. I just share my screen. Is it okay? Yes, I think so. So, good morning. I'm Jean-Pascal Klipfel, project manager on Fluo Grand Est. I'm working in the intermodality department of the institution Région Grand Est, which is French public transport authorities, the regional train line network and intercity coaches. The Région Grand Est has a key position in multimodality aspect and is using its public multimodal travel planning service Fluo to animate the network with the local PTA of the Grand Est in a co-financing project. So you can find the tool Fluo Grand Est in production online at www.fluo.eu or mobile apps on the stores. Fluo is not, for the MaaS point of view, it's not a complete tool for the moment because booking and ticketing is missing. But we are building different bricks like a card for multimodal ticketing or a 2D interoperable barcode platform generator, which will be in the future combined in customizable MaaS. So today I bring 15 years of policies of multimodal transport information system. I will talk about the French regulation and things which have changed since the beginning. And at the end, I will talk a little bit about the advent of MaaS in the Grand Est. So we start in 2009 with the Alsace project, our first public-private partnerships. We try to find a balance between public resources with 10 partners of Alsace and resources private with private resources like publicity or subscriptions. But at the end, it brings not so much private benefits. Many things changed until 2016 and the law for Digital Republic, which found significant steps to promote open sources, open algorithms, and open data for transparency in public sector. We knew a territorial big band too, with the merge of the old region and the creation of the Région Grand Est, and we have to deal from 10 partners to 40 partners. So many things has changed. And the LOM dedicate the LOM of 2019 dedicates the importance of intermodality with the region taking the lead. Another thing this induced by the LOM is the possibility for more rural territories to take the competence of transport authorities to develop light transport services like carpooling or transport on demand. And we will go for 135 public transport authorities in Grand Est. So the complexity is increased for the partnership. So to work with our partners, we create the Charter for Intermodality and Digital Services in Grand Est, with the objective to strengthen the coherence of transport policies, to develop services and innovation in mobility, to collectively manage the decision and the implementation of decision, and with the ambition to encourage the emergence of MaaS with a common database. It's more an infrastructure than a MaaS tool. So the charter declined in operational co-financing agreement with partners to develop all the brick. Now I will show you a diagram which explains the input in database and the system organization. So we have all this kind of data: public transport static offers, event, disturbing, real-time hub connecting to open data platforms, web services, operating system, tarification, point of interest. And we are connected with distributed European travel planning services to make cross-border trips with Germany, with Luxembourg, with Switzerland. After the partners can connect our customized media with an API, an application programming interface, with specific development or with an iframe or like integrated tools. For example, you can find on the right the media of Fluo I presented before, the website, the mobile app, but the media of the SNCF, the MAPI, Open Data Platform, or MaaS, local MaaS. Here is an illustration of our website information system. We are organized with tab, with transport modes, and we make a combination of all kind of transport. We aim to present all the mobility offers of the territory. We have special functionality, for example, the carbon footprint, which is based on the CO2 calculator for this kind of information. Here is another screenshot of our tool in production. So it's a map-centric organization. You can make your route, and all the possibilities are proposed, and the aim is to propose you something more relevant to the environment. And information maybe you don't know, because we have a specific information like transport on demand, all this kind of offers. You see the roadmap. Another reusing example is the CTS, is a company of Transport de Strasbourg, which is a French public transport operator, which develop MaaS based on our regional calculator. So it's you can book, you can buy your ticket, you can have the information for the SNCF, the regional train line, for the local urban tramway, for the foot routing. Another example is the public transport operator, urban public transport operator of Metz, Le Met, which develop a specific search formulaire, which is based on our API, and which allowed us to economize some investment on the calculator and the travel information system, and to focus on the other aspect of the product, of the MaaS product. So what's next? We try to open our data to encourage new partner to come on our system, and so we develop a full NetEx export of all the aggregate database. We open the API, and we develop we standardize the API with OGP to connect with our European partners. And we are now seeking about our new generation of medias with ticketing. Thank you for the attention. I don't know if the time is correct.
Oh, yeah, also well within time. I'm very proud on all speakers to be so disciplined, because every time I wanted to give you a 1 minute warning, you are already finished. So thanks a lot. Also here to all the participants, please, if you have questions to Jean-Marc, Pascal, put them in the chat, and then we'll come back to them in the panel discussion. For now, I want to thank you a lot for this interesting presentation. And again, we could talk about this for 2 hours more.
Okay.
But we have another speaker in line. Her name is Katarina Jonsson Bratu, probably pronounced that wrong, from Östgötatrafiken in Östergötland. And together with Sandra, Viktor, also from the same region, but from Linköping municipality. Question is, are you ready?
Yes, we are, and thank you for the introduction. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Just a second.
And you pronounced my name quite correctly.
Great. So can everybody see my screen now? Yes, great. So thank you for listening to us. My name is Sandra Viktor, and I work as a senior environmental officer at the municipality of Linköping. And together with me is Katarina. And today we're going to tell you can see, a story about the Linköping MaaS. We call it the almost Linköping MaaS because we were really hit hard by the pandemic. We actually had the kick-off for the project 1 month before the pandemic got the grip of the world. So you can imagine driving this kind of innovative project together with many partners due to the pandemic. It was quite busy for us, and so still we think it's very important to tell you what we came up with and also what we learned. So let's go. You can see here on the screen, here's actually the name of the MaaS solution. It's called SAP. You can SAP your way between different mobility modes, and you see our graphic profile and also a piece of the route planning here. And you can see the icons, get it on iTunes or get it on Google Play, and it's actually there. It's beta versions, but I will tell you soon why we are not like developing it further. So some things about Linköping first. You can see the heart, that's Linköping, placed in the southern part or the middle southern part of Sweden. We have about 160 inhabitants. It's the Sweden's 5th largest city. We have actually a quite low average age, about 39 years old. It's a student city, actually. We have a big university here. And it's also a regional hub for incoming commuters. About 20,000 people commute daily to Linköping. So it's quite a big hub. We also have this traffic strategy where we work towards a new share of travel modes from like private car use to more people to bike or go by public transport and so on. So you can see on the graphs down below, the blue things on the graph, it's car users, like everyday car users. So the latest survey that we did in 2018, you can see we have 52% car commuters, like in everyday travel, and 37% going by bike. The green one is bike, and 11% is commuting by public transport. So we also have this aim to achieve that, like reduce the number of car transport to 40% and increase the number of bikers, like up to 40%, and increase the numbers of public transports. So this is like the city. And some short facts of the project then. Linköping, together with different partners, were granted about 600,000 euros to the Linköping MaaS project from the Swedish Energy Agency. So between January 2020 and June now in 2021, we were aimed to develop and put a citywide MaaS to market introduction in Linköping. And with this service, we wanted to make it easier and more flexible for people to travel climate smart. We should develop this route planning and make it easier to book and pay for a range of shared mobility services, both like pay as you go and also capped, like combine packages that you could offer to the inhabitants. We have this service design thinking, developing from the users. So we have different personas, and we kind of mapped up their day and their month and try to develop functions that should really like attract different kind of people with different needs to use this service. And we were building this reliable basic service that could be upgraded and tailored step by step in dialogue with the users. So the main target group was commuters who were open to new alternatives. And why were we doing this? Why were we developing this project? Well, first of all, we have a growing population in Linköping, and we want to make like room for more people and nice things and not cars. And the climate is changing, and we have both global, national, and local climate goals. You heard Ebba talking about the European goals and the national goals, I said. And the local climate goal for Linköping is to be carbon neutral by 2025, and that's pretty ambitious. And also the technology is evolving. We see now a number of shared vehicles, and that's possible due to the digitalization. So the market is here now. And we aimed, as you know, maybe we have this kind of different levels of MaaS integrations. And we really aim for the highest. We wanted to like extend beyond this technical platform and like more put in this societal goals within this project. We wanted to reduce the number of cars and promoting livability in Linköping. So this is why we like in the top level of integrations and the societal goals included. So here you can see the Linköping MaaS ecosystem. that we built for this project. So the project owner was Sandkorsen Dukaten, actually a property owner and also parking company, municipality owned parking company, we should say, as the project owner. And the project coordinator was me from the city of Linköping, or the Linköping municipality. And then we have different partners here. You can say Kyyti. Kyyti is actually one of the winners of the Challenge from Sweden Innovation Competition that the Swedish Energy Agency and the Swedish Incubator and Science Park held for about 1.5 years ago. It's a Finnish startup company who offer this MaaS solution platform, but they are mainly focused on DRT. Then we have the public transport company. Katarina works at the Östgötatrafiken. And we had Heat Car Sharing, a peer-to-peer car sharing company, like a private car pooling company. And then we had Stångåstaden. It's actually the largest housing company in Linköping, municipality owned. They have about 18,500 apartments. So that's very important to have there, like with the customers. And we also have the VTI, the Swedish National Road and Transport Institute, and the university, LiU, Linköping University, involved, and also the Science Park. And then below you can see different names of the companies. We also have this company perspective because we work with different green travel plans in Linköping to reduce the number of carbon emissions from transport, like both in service but also commuting. So that's why we have involved different private companies in this development on this service. Yeah, the timeline from the project, we started to work with service design and then developing the functions, and then we had this proof of concept. We actually had the graphic profile and the app at the Google stores and so on. But then just before Christmas, Kyyti announced that they were bankrupt, actually. So we had to just stop the project. They couldn't proceed together with us. And that was really sad, because if the pandemic hadn't hit their company so hard, they couldn't develop at all, then I think we could actually have this service launched. But this is actually what happened. So the public pilot couldn't really be there, and no operations either. So that's where we are. So let's come to the business model. I know you're all eager to find out how we thought we should build this service. So the need owner is actually the municipality, and we have good discussions with property developers and the private companies. You see the symbols up there, and also the users, of course. And Dukaten was the service owner reseller, the parking company, the municipality-owned parking company was the owner reseller. And the technical supplier integrator was Kyyti, and Kyyti had their own agreements with Stripe connected to payments, and also intercom connected to customer support and so on. And then we have different mobility service provider connected to the project as well. It was Lean Bike, it's our citywide bike pool, and the P stands for Lean Park, it's parking. So we connect ride and park and ride and so on, this kind of tickets. And also Östgötatrafiken and TIER, you all know the micromobility electric scooter pool company. And we have HEAP, the peer-to-peer car sharing company, and also M, it's a car pool company, a larger one. And I can start from the top here. So from the municipality to finance this solution in long term, we came up with, I should start. We have a parking policy for city development, and we could set some demands in the development agreements together with the property developers, because we want to reduce the number of private car parking in new areas. So we steer to build more communal parking garages. So the property developer to pay an amount of money for a car parking place in new development areas. But then we came up within this project, why couldn't they, instead of buying car parking places, buy mobility service? So pay amount of money for reduced car parking space to mobility service instead, and a number of percentage of this fee, you could actually finance the MaaS service, and also the mobility hubs, and also the shared vehicles within the mobility hubs. So that's why we were steering from car parking, private car parking, to mobility services. And the financer were the city developer in the city. So that's why we had this kind of business idea.
Sandra?
Yes?
I have to bring you bad news.
Yes.
You're
1 minute.
11 minutes already.
Oh my God. Okay, I could. And yeah, we can skip this. So the challenges were COVID-19, and we also have the API. They were missing or not yet sufficiently developed, as many others said. And also how to go from pilot to procurement, but that's what we're going to solve now. The knowledge, maybe Katarina, you would say just something about the knowledges before we start.
Absolutely. One of the best parts of it is, I think, the importance of the region and the municipality to work together with such solutions, because we're really different roles and responsibilities, but we together can solve the problem, sort of. The municipality wants to use the space, the city space, and also provide good service to inhabitants in the rural area. And the region has the regional perspective. So we really need to work together. We also understood a lot more about the complexity, as I heard many others of you mention, and especially about APIs and standards, or rather lack of standards. Also the need for a long-term perspective and resilience, not the least talking about the financial perspective, since it will take several years before such a solution might be profitable. And that is something that all parties need to be aware of. You really need to be convinced and work with your business. And in the future, I don't know if you want to speak about the future.
You can take it.
There is a large potential in MaaS solutions for the future. It has to be built around public transport as the backbone. On that, I think we can all agree. And we need to be courageous and test and learn from the testing, and then test again and again. This is evolution. It doesn't come by itself overnight. We have to try and learn by doing, more or less. So maybe I should stop there.
Yeah, and the best thing is the politicians, as everyone is still encouraging us to work with the challenge-driven innovation again, not see this as a fail, it's an evolution. So that's the message from us. Keep trying, we'll get there.
Thanks a lot, really. Again, we should have half a day for this because there is too much to ask and to learn. But we have 2 more speakers to go, and we have a panel discussion. So we will be a little bit later than planned, but I hope that participants have 10 minutes more. So I'm going now to Sardinia in Italy. To Eleonora Sottile, Senior Resource Fellow at the CRiMM, the Research Center on Mobility Models. The question is, are you ready, Eleonora?
Yes, I'm ready.
The floor is yours.
Okay. It's okay, yeah? You can see my presentation? Oh.
Perfect, yes.
Okay. Good morning. Today I'm going to talk about the sustainable mobility, and in particular of the VTBC program Svolta. Okay, let me start by giving you some background information just to arrive to the point of this presentation. As you are aware, and as already mentioned by others colleagues, addressing the climate and environmental crisis is the is the defining challenge of our time, and it's an opportunity to relaunch our economies in a sustainable manner. So, as well known, responding to this challenge, the European Green Deal of December 2019 has set a strategic framework for climate neutrality by 2050. So, turning our attention on now to transport and mobility, as this chart shows, transport, the blue line, is the only economic sector in which greenhouse gas emissions are higher than in 1990 and have started growing again since 2013, despite the mitigation efforts undertaken. So what is the problem? Transport causes more than 80% of such external costs. And in particular, the expansion of road networks, the increase in distance traveled and the number of trips have created car-dependent cities. Private car remains the most used means of transport. So an important behavior process underpins travel choices, and often a change in choice context is not sufficient to evoke behavior change. So mobility as a service, of course, is one of the best solutions to solve this problem. However, before making decisions, individuals don't always have the time required to obtain all the available information and to choose for themselves. I think that it's very important to involve individual in a program. What is the challenge? The challenge is to modify the culture by encouraging individuals to change their travel behavior by using more sustainable modes, of course. How to do it? Implementing voluntary travel behavior change programs, VTBC, is meant to improve community information and awareness about negative effects produced by car use in order to reduce private car use and increase the use of sustainable modes such as active mobility, public transport, sharing mobility, and of course, intermodality. What are the VTBC programs? VTBC programs are also referred as soft measures that use information communication to encourage a more efficient use of transport system, making car users aware of existing travel mode alternatives and of the impact of their behavior at a personal and societal level, providing quantitative feedbacks in terms of travel time, cost, CO2 emission, or calories burned. The literature on this topic suggests to use the combination of these measures, coercive measures and voluntary measures. Let's move now on the experience of the University of Cagliari on this topic. Since 2011, the University of Cagliari has been developing several VTBC programs to promote sustainable mobility and to contribute to understand the effectiveness of a soft measure implementation and a persuasive technology. You can see some example in this slide in which we use just soft measure or the combination of hard and soft measures and the persuasive technology. Sorry. Okay. Considering the results, we can reasonably claim that the awareness campaign in the specific context contributes by more than 30% to behavior change. Further, the combination of hard and soft measures achieved a change in travel behavior of 46% with the VTBC program. Starting from this experience and these important results, has been defined the VTBC Svolta, which in English means turn. The aim of the program was promoting a more sustainable travel behavior among individuals working and studying in the municipality of Cagliari, the main city in Sardinia in Italy. Some slogan of the project Okay, in this slide you can see the steps of the program. We started with the mass communication campaign. In the second step, we conducted the first wave survey. The first questionnaire allowed to gather information on the home to work study trip, on psychoattitudinal and socioeconomics individuals profile. We have the intention to monitor the travel behavior of individuals through an app named Svoltiamo, but the third step has been postponed to data to be determined to do the COVID pandemic. Between October and December 2020, we contacted again all individuals that answered to the first questionnaire to fill a second questionnaire about their travel behavior during the different phases of the pandemic. This second step of the program was not scheduled, of course, but it was required once the virus had already spread. Compared to the first questionnaire, we added some questions on the travel behavior and work study modality, but all the questions of the first one were also maintained in the second one to be able to make a direct comparison. This is particularly important for the psychosocial questions. And we delivered in the next step the personalized travel plan. And the last step, we will contact all car drivers who expressed in the first questionnaire the interest in taking part to all phases of the program. And we asked them to use for at least 2 weeks the smartphone application named Svoltiamo. This app will allow us to monitor in real time their travel behavior and to provide a personalized travel plan to promote sustainable alternative means of transport. Okay, this is an example of the travel plan. The personalized travel plan was emailed to the participant, contained a practical map showing the trip by alternative means of transport suggested, a detailed description of individual and environmental effects of the travel behavior adopted, with a daily, weekly, and annual evaluation of the key factors that come into play in travel choice, for example, monetary cost, journey time, calories burned, and CO2 emission. In this part, the personalized persuasive message such as the social and descriptive norm. And in the last part, you can see a little state preference survey to measure the intention to change. Okay, this is the interface of the app Svoltiamo. The app Svoltiamo makes it possible to collect and process activity travel data and automatically deliver information. This platform has been designed following the requirements, the principles and design procedures found to be fundamental for influencing the behavior and for enhancing the persuasive features in promoting the sustainable travel behaviors. And we use also the gamification strategies to incentivize car use reduction. Some results, just 2 words, we have a very important panel data, around 5,000 questionnaires have been fully completed. And I think that is very interesting study. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your great presentation. Very interesting again. Proud on our lineup today. And now, thank you. And we'll go to the next and last speaker, last but definitely not least, to Marko Javornik, founder of the M8 Lab from Ljubljana, which is one of my favorite cities in Europe. And next week, I have the honor to be there again. But I will give you the floor, Marko, if you are ready.
Yes, I'm ready.
Your floor is yours.
So thank you, and yeah, greetings to everyone also from my side. So as mentioned, my name is Marko Javornik. I'm the founder, CEO of M8 Lab. I come from Slovenia. I've been involved with digital technology for 25 years, and specifically with MaaS over 7 years now. I'm leading several initiatives in my region, but also from the beginning, basically, I was looking globally what is happening, and I joined the pioneers of MaaS in MaaS Alliance very early from the beginning. And the last 4 years, I was chairing the work group for business models and regulation. So I'll talk also a little bit about this, let's say, global perspective. So a lot has been said, so really short. Yeah, we are hopefully finishing the century of the car, which solves a lot of problems with the horses, brought us the horseless carriage using the machine. But the success, 1.4 billion cars also brings new problems that we need to deal with. And luckily we have new technologies available, electrification and digitalization. And this brings us to the new concept of mobility. And yes, it is not fully understood by everyone yet, but I'm really happy about the progress in the last, let's say, 5 years plus. So this is now a buzzword on the radar of many regions and stakeholders. We're talking about user-centric mobility, where we are integrating different modes of mobility. And I also included this maturity model that was mentioned before. All of this is well documented in MaaS Alliance library if somebody wants to pay attention to that. Where are we today globally? So there are hundreds of pilot projects, and I'm really happy to hear about a few new ones today. There's a lot of activity. We have over 1 billion people using mobility services, but when it really comes to MaaS, the numbers are more in thousands. So there is still a lot of work ahead of us. And if I need to name, let's say, the 3 key challenges, I would say infrastructure, I would say behavior change, and I would say financing, but there's tons of others as well, but these are the 3 that at least I'm personally focusing a lot in my latest experiments in the region. I want to start with my own perspective. So when we look at global, sometimes we miss some of the points, and then suddenly, you start cleaning up your own bed, and you learn a lot of things that you don't see in China, US, everywhere in Europe. And this is what I like to do. So the last 2 years, I'm living without a car in my household. And I really paid a lot of attention on a weekly basis, what is happening. And I want to share this briefly with you. So in terms of distance travel, it was pretty much the same in the first year without a car. The cost is about half of what was before, and the CO2 footprint is basically 1/3 of what was before. But this is really far from what is possible. This is really, I would call this beta testing, early testing of things that are still emerging. A lot of services are still missing to make this really comfortable and in the most efficient way. But I can demonstrate with my own behavior, with my own numbers, there's a lot of potential for improvement if we embrace mobility as a service. But there are also a lot of challenges, and I would like to talk about 2 projects that are solving these challenges in the local region. So there's a lot of talk about app and platform that integrates mobility modes, and that's important part of MaaS, no doubt about it. But unless you have the infrastructure there, I mean, you will not convince people to join this, And in our region, we have great public transport, but 50% of people live in urban areas. There's a lot of commuting that goes outside of this. So there are definitely areas that are not well connected. And this can be geographically, or it can be time-wise. Perhaps during the weekend or non-peak hours, you have limited connectivity. And this is what we try to solve with electric vehicle-based car sharing. And this was really designed so that, people start using it in these medium-sized cities. And it was designed so that we really, in the end, they can give up their own car, just like I did. And I know now hundreds of people did the same. And this means that you really need to design the service with great detail. For example, one of the latest things that we are doing, we are working with the real estate company so that when they build new buildings, instead of building parking spaces, basically they create spaces for car sharing, which are closer to the parking spaces of people using privately owned car. And I think this concept of car-free neighborhoods, I think it has a lot of potential, So this is one of the good practices that I would definitely encourage others to follow. Now, the other part is for me super interesting, and it's really emerging. It builds on this behavior change, behavior economics. And my learnings, I have to say, in 7 years. So there is no way that you will convince the person that, for example, use 20 years their own car, their parents use their own car all the time, you will not bring them to MaaS in one step. It will just not happen. And this is based on this zone of proximal development theory from Vygotsky, and many, many other studies confirm this. So what we are trying to do is, because there are a lot of people that essentially are kind of fixated on using their own car, we try to now nudge them using these behavior economics approaches to start using mobility services a little bit. And what we are doing with the local county, which is in a very, very nice area of Slovenia with mountains, with lakes, with water park and so forth, we are packaging mobility services into experiences, and we are promoting experiences, not mobility services. We don't say, hey, it will be train, it will be shuttle, it will be car sharing and so forth, but we say, look at these beautiful mountains, you know, look at this water park and so forth. Would you like to go on Saturday, on Tuesday, or whatever, in the summer holidays and so forth? Mostly we focus on leisure time because we see that people are more susceptible for behavior change when they are not under stress of this daily commuting, you know, even though no doubt about it, daily commuting is the bigger issue. But when you are dealing with behavior change, you need to start when you can start. And this many times is a leisure time. So this is what we're launching next month. So packaging experiences together with essentially door-to-door mobility using mobility services so that we bring new mobility modes to people who haven't experienced them for 10, 20 years. And they will now understand that in the age of information age, basically, this is much more pleasant than they remember perhaps from their student days 20 years ago. So that's it from me. And yeah, happy to ask any questions about this topic.
Great, thanks a lot. Then we go to the panel discussion, a panel in which all speakers will be, and also Martin. So I'll ask you to come to the floor. Wait for a moment. And in the same time, I try to check what questions there are for you in the chat. All right, here. Before I go to some general questions, I'll check if there are any individual questions. To Jean-Pascal, a question, what were the elements that worked best to get stakeholders to collaborate in the regional intermodality system? Could you short reflect on that, Pascal?
Sorry, I don't understand. Can you repeat
the question in the chat to you is, what were the elements that worked best to get stakeholders to collaborate in the regional intermodality system?
Well, okay, thank you. I think the most important things is dialogue between us, first public transport authorities, and we frequently have occasion to discuss about project of infrastructure, of organization, and the fact to create a charter or a place to dialogue is the best thing to catch the attention and to create a new dynamic, new projects.
Perfect, thank you. I have also a question for Sandra and Katarina. Now it pops away. What are the main takeaways from the COVID pandemic impact on the project? Something.
Should I start, Sandra? Well, one is about financing, of course. I mean, being within the public sector, you have a stable financing, which is really long term. But for smaller participants who might be dependent on external financing, of course, it's really tricky when something as the pandemic appears. So, I mean, the financing part is really something to consider. And that is also linked together with the governmentally financed projects, which are in this context pretty short term. So it's difficult to run projects under such circumstances. So do you want to add something, Sandra?
No, I think that was a great answer.
Perhaps also Martin can reflect on that from the perspective as a politician.
Well, I'm if I get ahead of the times, I'm thinking a bit about the other question that was asked to Sandra and Katarina in the chat about the business model and buying mobility instead of parking, if that could be political sensitive. And my reflection as a politician, I think this could really be put in a bigger context, because we have some global trends: digitalization, sharing, and transformation from products to services. And MaaS is existing in the intersection between these trends and our human need of mobility. And I think it's very easy, as politicians, we usually try to solve the problems of yesterday. And as Marco was showing about the century of the car, finding parking places is one problem. And I think what Sandra and Katarina and other of you helped us to understand is that if we ask another question, then we also will have another answer. So if we as politicians think that the problem is to find parking places, then it is political sensitive to sell mobility instead of parking places. But if we manage to understand what is happening, and if we are being educated in what the future looks like and not only what the history looks like, then I don't think it will be political sensitive, because then at least most of us will understand, and also the people that in the end is voting to give us another term will understand that, well, my need is mobility, it's not a parking place. Then the parking place could be a part of that mobility, but it's not the only answer.
Exactly. Yeah, that is true and interesting. Last week I heard a politician from Brussels region speak about his experiences, how there was so much opposition to their plans in Brussels, and when it was implemented, even the people who opposed it were really happy. So sometimes it needs a little bit political courage, he wants to say, and then believe in what is needed, and then it will prove to be good. But I will have a question for Marco also. I lost it almost. Where? Here, yes. Especially for Marco, but other guests can answer is the question. Do you have any added health indicators in the calculation to demonstrate other benefits with mobility as a service? Less car, better health, question mark.
Yeah, we do have it on the conceptual level. So for example, tracking active mobility, and we understand the societal benefits, you know, for example, for a city bike, it's no, so a bike trip brings about €3 of societal benefits, and half of this is in health, you know. So in this context, we do include it, but there are now initiatives that go beyond this, that actually focus on the actual health, you know, so how this changes when you change your mobility behavior. So this is something that's the next thing for us.
Yes, great. Then I have a question in general to all of you, and please just take the floor when you want to answer the question. And of course, it is always what we want to share what goes right. We want to demonstrate our successes and share the story what went successful. But we all know we learn more from mistakes. So what we're doing is learning by doing. So that it means there are a lot of lessons learned, and it is not always fun to share those stories, but that is what I'm going to ask you. What went wrong, and really, really wrong, and what did you learn? I mean, was it useful to have that mistake for the future? Because we are here about a session about implementing MaaS. We really want to learn from everyone else. So who wants to take the floor to share the best lesson learned? Not all in the same time.
I can start.
Yes, please.
I think the most important lesson learned is that you start small. I think we had this idea when we started out that we would just sort of implement a MaaS solution with all public transport easily. And this was something we could just buy on the market. And I think especially in more rural areas, it's not that easy because first of all, we don't have all the transport operators already here. We didn't have any micromobility. We didn't have car sharing. So this wasn't a shelf product that was just readily available for us. So I think the most important lessons we have learned is that to communicate well with the stakeholders that this will take time and we need to do small steps, one thing at a time, for stakeholders, politicians like Martin, but also for the general public that might envision a fully operating services when we first roll out, and trying to communicate this agile and the testing and the development and the trying and failing and doing again throughout to the public, which just wants something that works, has been as challenging. So that's the best lesson learned. Still work with small steps and do it with the people, both stakeholders and public.
I would like to add to this because my experience is very much related, and I agree with this. I'm a technology guy, 25 years developing digital platforms. The big issue is not technology. So yes, you need to test things, you need to validate things on the market, but not so much technology. Technology is the easy part. It's the business model, it's the user experience and so forth. And this requires experimentation on the ground in terms of labs and so forth. And this requires to fail, or let's use the other word, learn many times, and step by step. The technology is the easy piece, but will the users actually work? Will there be a business model that actually works? This is the hard piece.
Exactly. Sandra, you're nodding all the time, so.
I agree with everything said, but still, I think we're really unsure right now if we should continue to develop a new kind of MaaS service ourselves, or if we should abonate or buy the service or integrate our mobility service into another existing platform, because the market has actually changed due to this last 2 years since we wrote the application. So the market is still immature, but still a bit more mature. So maybe we can actually choose from one of the existing platforms now. But I would really love to try our business model again, but maybe it's not going to happen, but let's see. We tried, we learned, we had these discussions, and we actually updated our parking policy due to this MaaS project, like a spin-off from the MaaS project. We had to upgrade a lot of the policies, and that's very good because we are step by step closer to a MaaS, or closer to this new personal mobility system instead of car owning. And that's the goal for the municipality and the region as well. So we still aim to more sustainable mobility solutions for the inhabitants. So I think we are one step closer, but we are not yet there.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else who wants to reflect on this topic?
Yeah, I would like to add that we also need to remember that, I mean, it's the user who actually makes sense of a MaaS platform or the MaaS services. What we're talking about is not only behavioral changes which are needed, but also changes in attitudes and way of thinking. Speaking about the car, the history of the car and how it was considered. And now we need, I mean, the car is established as a model in our minds. And that model is not, I mean, it's not a fact. It's an idea of what the car represents. And this idea has to change. That is what we are struggling with. And we're working our way towards this change, but changes of such attitudes takes a really long time, and we need to work on that and understand that that's the way it works.
Yeah.
So
going back to the chat again, because there are two interesting questions from Martin Ricknell in the chat, and I leave it to you who wants to answer. Do you know of any MaaS service or project which is fully financed by a city or a region as part of the ordinary budget to reach a more sustainable society? And his second question is, our experience is that it is hard to include existing by the cities procured micro-mobility services in MaaS solutions. Do you experience better understanding from this need in discussions with cities and regions? I can answer that for my region, but I would want to ask who wants to reflect on this question from Martin Ricknell.
I can give it a first shot. So there's a number of different business models, you know, B2C, B2B, B2G. So if you go to MaaS Alliance page, there's a library, there's about 20 cases, and you will find also these B2G cases. For example, Dubai is one of those, fully financed by the government, you know. So, but everybody's exploring. So you know, it's really a lot of different business models. So also, you know, city by city, region by region, they're all a bit different, you know. So there's no, unfortunately, there's no yet like a recipe. This is how you do it, and you're successful.
Exactly. Yeah, that is what I can share from our region. Also, it's learning by doing, and what we do is innovate, like what John presented, the existing public transport, and use existing subsidies for that, and so give subsidies also to MaaS services for more remote areas, and regulate that.
And may I comment, Edwin, because in the end, it's also a political question. What is the role of the city or the region or the PTA, Public Transport Authority, if there is someone that have been thinking all this webinar what PTA means? Because in one end, we could let the market handle everything. A step closer, we could facilitate an app, but then it's up to the market to fill the app with mobility solutions. In the other hand, in the other end of the spectrum, we could say that in the same way as we have public buses that are in most places partly paid by the taxes, we could say that mobility is something that should be paid by taxes regardless where you are. And this is a very important and interesting political discussion. But since not even me that have been thinking about MaaS since the first time I met you, Edwin, 4 or 5 years ago, I don't feel that I have enough knowledge to make a political decision about that. So one reason I think we need to build the knowledge about MaaS in political circle is that is a requirement for us to be able to make that kind of decision. How much public money should be used in the MaaS solutions? Today, we don't know enough to have a political opinion on that. And therefore, it's also not very much public financing, even if it maybe might be needed.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, Martin. Sandra? Sorry, Sandra was one second.
Just a quick reply on that. I think that due to we all know that the public transport is the backbone of the MaaS service, I think it's the region who should take the bigger responsibility to form a strategy how to implement MaaS in the region, because the city of Linköping is one part, but we still want the PT and the region to be more involved. That's a lesson learned in this project. We should have a closer connection between us. So I think that's very important too.
Yeah, agree. Eleonora, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I would like to say just two things. In my personal opinion, it requires urgent and sustained action by all actors in our society to be able to obtain good results, because often public and private organizations tend to make the wrong choices just to protect in the short time their own economic interest. This is a typical example that often happens in Italy due to the fact that there are several transport companies that manage the transport system, so that it becomes difficult to speak of integration and intermodality, for example. This is one point. And the other point is that I'm not completely agree with Marco when he says that people don't change their behavior, because the literature found that between 5 and 15% of change is possible thanks to the soft measures. We obtain greater results because our samples are conveniently sampled and we stress them. It's not easy. You have to monitor in short and long-term individuals, and this method is efficacy just for a particular target of people with a particular psychoattitudinal profile, of course, but I think that is possible and I have some results.
Want to react on that?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And by the way, COVID-19 showed that also big changes can happen immediately, you know, so we should be very ambitious.
Yeah, okay.
I completely agree, and we need more experts like you that actually, because there's such a lack of behavior science in transport sector. It's unbelievable, you know, so we are thinking about so many things, but the key thing is fundamentally lacking in competence. About the financing, if I just may, to Martin, so it really is a change of culture, a change of dynamics. So when you go to MaaS, it's digital, it's agile, it's iterative. You know, Uber is changing on a weekly basis their products. Facebook, you know, financing, you know, the ads, this is, you're targeting one person where it's going. And then you go to subsidies for transport, and you are talking about 5 years, you're talking about regions and so forth. So this is such a big gap towards where the state of the art of technology is today. So I think this is the one thing that should be changed, you know, understanding that financing of MaaS must be digital, data-driven, dynamic, real-time demand, you know, targeted, and not the same way as it was 50 years ago.
Great.
I totally agree. I just have to understand what that means in a political context.
Yeah. I was just putting in the chat that I will continue with this panel if no one stops me from moderating. So way over time, 20 minutes already, but this is really so interesting. We have to come to a closure, of course, otherwise I get problems with Joanna. One really important thing is, of course, most of us are regional governments, and you told a lot already about the role of regional governments, the role of governments in this process. But what I'm curious about, if anyone has anything to share about that, it's also a new role for us as governments compared to the old times when we were only involved with legislation and that. And now it is this role of boosting innovation, bringing stakeholders together and get things done and learning by doing. Do you have anything, I can talk about it, but do you have anything to share about this specific new role as a local or regional government, also internally and in relation to the political dynamic? What went well and what went wrong there, and what would you want to see different in your government? Big question.
I can start. Well, in Linköping, actually, we this winter we started to form roadmap for smart mobility, because we saw that the politicians and internally we didn't have the knowledge about what is about to happen within the mobility sector. It's going fast, and we have to be more knowledge to actually work with this things. And it's due to MaaS, and it's due to this kind of micro mobility services, it's due to data, GDPR, and all these things connected. And this smart mobility roadmap is actually going up to our politicians after this summer for this decision making. And also we try to form a group of people and an organization to work with this within this field, because we don't have that in Linköping yet, and we have to like form a group that crosses the region, the city, and within the municipality, and together with the private market as well, to build this knowledge and understanding for each other. So that's what we are actually trying to form, and that's a spin-off from the MaaS project, that we just, okay, we have to form a complete, like not just do this project, it's a part of the ordinary work that we have to build a structure for. So that's what happened.
Certainly. Thank you. Martin, you wanted to say something? May I give you the last word to close the panel?
Yes, I could do that. And then I just, first of all, I'm so honored to be able to sit in a panel with such bright minds that today. And I know a lot of people that didn't have the possibility to attend this webinar, but they are looking forward to look at the recording afterwards. And I think I will do that myself when I can reflect more about what is said. I have some conclusions from this day. One of them is that it has strengthened me, my belief that MaaS really is a solution. And as you said, Marco, the future will look completely different, and we have to understand and adapt to that. It's also a conclusion that most of us, we face the same challenges and obstacles, and that's an important reminder that we should look and learn from each other, because some of the problems I have identified in my region is problems that maybe Nordland already has solved, and the other way around. One thing that is common is that almost all of us take up the business model and trying to find smart ways to finance a MaaS solution. And also where we can use the MaaS solutions. I think it's probably easiest to reach a critical mass needed in urban areas, even if it was interesting to listen to the experiences from Nordland. But the capabilities, I think, could then be applied in more rural areas, even if you're thinking, Sandra, buying next up from the shelf. I think that one of the interesting parts in your SAP app, even though you couldn't describe it in detail, is how agile that application is. So even if you were creating it to be used in the central of Linköping, it could also be used for MaaS solutions in other areas. But the bottom line is that I still think this is a important area from a political perspective. I think it's very important to build the political knowledge, because today, and now I speak for the European regional politicians, we don't have the competence to be a speaking partner in the development of MaaS solutions. And I think since the cities and regions are such crucial actors, we as politicians also need to have a better understanding how we could help to make this change happen. But I'm even more boosted than before, that mobility is one of the really interesting areas to be working with, both political and as an expert today and for the coming years. So if last century was the century of the car, this maybe is the century of the mobility, or maybe that's too conservative, that this is the century of connectivity. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
Everybody. And
Thank you.
It was really great session, and I really hope that next time we will meet in real life somewhere in Europe, in a nice seminar in Brussels or Sweden or Ljubljana or wherever. Because it's nice to have this session, but also nice to have a break afterwards. And there is a lot to be done. And also what Ebba started with in the beginning, there are a lot of opportunities also in the European arena, both in projects. As governments, we can learn by participating in all kinds of European funded projects in CEF and Interreg and Horizon. And what Marco mentioned also, the MaaS Alliance, it's a perfect network also to learn together with industry. There is the AR, there is Polish network, and so there is us, the New Mobility Service Initiative. So there are many opportunities, not only to work on a local and a regional level, but also work together with governments and industry and universities in whole Europe. But that is why we are also a member of AR, so I don't have to convince you about that. We used half an hour more time than we were supposed to, but I guess that is because everyone is so enthusiastic. So I'm going to close this session, and if I don't hear Joanna now, then I want to thank everyone and see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank
See
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.